All right, so let's talk about fourfold breathing.
Sure.
Where do we start here with fourfold breathing for seeing energy?
Well, I think it's just the idea. I mean, besides this specific technique, it's like, can our breathing affect our ability to see? In this case, specifically,
Yeah,
we know that breathing can affect a lot of things. It can change perceptual states, which is really what we're trying to do and enhance, right?
right.
And with the specific goal for us of seeing energy. So, uh, the reason that fourfold breath can be tailored to that, so to speak, I mean, as long as we have a clear intent of what we're doing, right, is that it brings us to basically a state of neutrality, with that very, very even box breathing or fourfold breath, right? So box breathing is what the military has called it now. So, but originally it was a fourfold breath, and there's a bunch of other people that are using augmented names to basically do
For
the
the
same
same
thing
thing.
for the same thing.
Right.
So, but the original term was fourfold breath. So, and basically the idea is that in doing that properly, it sort of brings us to a neutral state. And what does that mean? It's like from our normal conscious um, mode of beta, where we're having a conversation and engaged in doing things outside, and all of that's in beta, basically. And so alpha is what we're trying to move into at this place, and the fourfold breath will help us facilitate that in a better way. And as we do that and we get more consistent with it, it basically, when we start the breathing, it already starts to ramp us down. So it's like a lot of these things are anchored in. So that's why we sort of pause when we're doing it and say, like, how does it feel? Where do you feel it in your body? How does this respond? Are you noticing sort of an opening up of perception, but a decrease in, let's say, frenetic sort of brain activity, right? So a lot of people, with meditation or these practices, one of the common things that's inhibiting is, that monkey mind, that's, lots of random thoughts getting in there and distracting us or confusing us or whatever. So the fourfold breath, in bringing us into that alpha state, that's really reduced. And so again, the idea is that it will change our perceptual state. We also know that in alpha, we're much more open to learning. It's much easier, right? There's not so much tension in it, right? It's not like you're really forcing yourself to learn something. It's more like alpha is a state when we're observing, watching a movie and really being engaged with the movie, right? And so we're feeling it in our body, and the tense parts, we feel tense, and it's the reason that we go to the movies, right? Because we want to be not just entertained, but we sort of want to have an emotional connection to it, and those are the ones that are really good for us. And so if it were something on the opposite, I always tell people the difference would be like just watch a movie without the sound. It's not nearly the same emotional impact for us, right? So alpha sort of, we get into that state. It's like reading a good book as well is another one that, just sort of like when you get in there and it's like, as you're reading, it's more like you're watching the scenes unfold in your mind, right? So it's not something you have to try to do. When it's really engaging, you just kind of get in there and go with it. And the fourfold breath sort of facilitates bringing us into that perceptual state, so, and that's why it helps with seeing, because it's a nice entry point. Can we see in beta? Sure, but it takes a little time to get proficiency to do that. But alpha is a nice place to sort of entry level get into that place. And of course, it goes from alpha to theta. It's like different degrees of alpha moving down, and then into that theta zone where it's your imaginal world is actually even more prominent than your physical reality that's around you. So, and again, it takes a little time to sort of adjust down to that, but this is where we start. And from that start, and as we relax even more, it sort of helps us to maneuver more into that, slower, deeper state.
Right.
Yeah.
And can you talk about the idea of like being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and does that relate to the fourfold breathing as well when with seeing?
Sure. I mean, I think most people will notice when they do the fourfold breath correctly, uh, that there will be, let's say, out of the four sides, so breathing in, holding it at the top, breathing out, holding it at the bottom for the same count, that one of those sides will probably be more difficult than the others. Without actually trying to observe it, you'll just notice after, a minute or so that you'll notice that one side, like a lot of times people will find that that bottom one where you're breathing all the way out and then holding that for a count of four, that four is sort of like, okay, when do I get to breathe? And so there's that little bit of anxiety that happens there. But as you continue, that's going to level out. And so that's what we want. We want each side to be exactly the same as the other side. And it's not something you have to force, right? So we want to really get away from this idea on everything that you have to force, you have to put more force into something to make it happen. It's not, it's a different way of thinking about things, right? For us, our understanding is that this is all happening around us all the time anyway. Energy, it's there. And this being able to see the energy is not something that it's like you're not making it happen. It's happening. You're just trying to bring yourself in alignment with that frequency so that you can actually observe it. And that's it, right? So it's not like, oh, if I concentrate harder, if I do this more, that we have to sort of pull ourselves back from that normal paradigm that we're in, right? It's like, I want to get more work done. I have to work faster. I want to get, I want to move more stuff. I've got to get stronger. It's like, more force to produce the effect that we're looking for. And in the energetic realm, it's more relaxed, produces more focus. And in that relaxation, it opens our perceptual, gates a little bit wider. And as time goes on, we get better and better and better at it.
So the fourfold breathing is very much akin to the relaxation, but maybe from more of a mental avenue to that relaxation, putting yourselves in neutral. Mentally.
Yeah. And also, but physically too, right? Because again, you'll notice when you find that one side that's a little bit harder than the others, there's a certain, let's say a tiny bit of anxiety that comes up from that. Like, when am I going to breathe? It's like, can I hold it this long? Am I going to rush the tempo? That kind of thing. So, it gives you the ability, coming back to that last question, it's, how do we get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? That's partly, my job.
Well, there's
to
a lot
get
of
you to be in that zone.
And there's a lot of there can be a discomfort that comes up from, like, when you're doing either the relaxation or the gazing or whatever, and things start to shift or things start to change or your perceptual state moves into a new place. It's like it's that whole idea of moving into the unknown or the unfamiliar.
Right. Even if for some people, if they're so high paced all the time,
right?
They're like mid to high beta on a regular basis, or maybe consistently. Even slowing everything down and moving into that alpha, or getting ready to move into alpha, that can be anxiety inducing too. I have plenty of people that,
right,
being quiet is really discomforting to them,
right?
Because they're just not in that mode enough. And it sounds like, people that are running like that, a lot of times they'll say things like, oh, if I could just relax. Oh, if I could just, like longing to do that. And like, oh, if I get a break here, I can relax a little bit. But even in that relaxation state, it's so unfamiliar, it becomes anxiety producing. So, it's a funny thing, but, we really do get sort of entrained to, our normal mode of operation, and things that vary up or down from that actually produce a bit of anxiety because it's not familiar, right? It's not, and unfamiliar becomes uncomfortable, right? Our comfort zone is where we're used to. When we're not in that comfort zone, it takes a lot to adjust our attitudes. So we're thinking about things like, is this, can I engage this in an adventurous way? I know it's going to be odd. I know it's going to be, unfamiliar. So, but can I get in there and go with it and really, let it run its course and just be in that observational mode? And it's another thing where the fourfold breath comes in handy, right? Because if you, like, let's say you've done it for a while, but And you have a good handle on the fourfold breath, and you sort of have the sense and the feeling of like moving into that alpha state, right? And we talk about it, dropping the brain waves down a bit and being a little bit slower, sort of opening you up to the experience being a little bit more free flow. There's not as much resistance there when that happens, right? So information comes in and goes out, and it's almost like, in another way of thinking about it, it's sort of like giving yourself a little bit more distance, so you become less emotionally engaged and more observational. And that's always good. And again, coming back to something that I said before, which is like, imagine watching a scary movie or something that makes you really tense, scene, and then turning down the sound. That's a way of sort of separating yourself out from the emotional response to it. Because now it's just a picture that's moving around and doing things. And even if you know what it is, without that sound and the music enhancing the emotional response and connecting you to that, it really loses a lot of its impact.
And why is that important for transitioning into being able to see energy?
Well, because again, as you start to get into it, one of the biggest complaints is that I just start to see it and I get so excited that, boom, I'm back to my normal view, right? And, it's sort of that idea of being excited, bounces you back into beta, where it's like, okay, now I'm engaged in my normal environment again, because that's familiar, right? It's very easy to jump back into that because it's where you live most of the time, right? So in the fourfold breath, when you start, let's say, gazing or something like that, any technique that's going to shift your perceptual state, there will be a point during it, maybe not right in the beginning, but as it progresses and things start to change, and you really notice at some point that things are shifting a bit. You're not seeing things as you did before, or just even a few minutes before, right? So there can be a little bit of that tension that comes up, like bracing yourself for what comes next, or like, oh, this is really odd. Is this you know is this the right thing? Does everybody get this? Am I odd? Is this bad? All of those questions come up. Am I doing it wrong? It's like, should it feel like this? It's like, and all of those things. So as that happens, if you go back to that fourfold breath, it can help you just sort of ease that transition and, again, sort of give you a little bit of that distance. So now you're just observing. It's turned the volume down on the emotional content of it again. And it's such a great tool to have on board all the time. It's one of those ones that we use for many things. We're just adjusting it for the seeing, right? But it's just a tool that's very practical for regular everyday life. I mean, how many times when you're really engaged and you're not making good decisions because you're so emotionally engaged, it's like you're popping one thing off and you're just digging it's that old thing, like with my kids, right? It's like you're digging your hole deep. Every time you open your mouth, you're digging your hole deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And so it's like the fourfold breath can give you a chance to sort of separate yourself a bit, leave that emotional content behind when, for another time when you can utilize it, right? But that observational mode, okay, it's like, this will be fine. Just breathe and I'll be back, into that place, continue the process, keep going. And, if at any time it really gets overwhelming, anything that I do will immediately snap me back to the, your normal observation, your normal place of observation, basically.
Right.
So
it's so weird how when we're, it's again coming back to that idea of we're so conditioned to think more force, more result, or more effort, more result, or more harder work, faster, all this stuff, and it's a strange and new transition to make, thinking about, okay, I want to learn to see energy, I want to initiate this experience, so I need to do something obviously to move into that place. But each one of these techniques, they're all in some ways a form of not doing or undoing your normal pattern of being, which is very strange, because it's like, okay, I can disengage and put myself into a more receptive state, a more balanced state, a more relaxed state. I'm doing less, I'm engaged less with the physical. But it's like, okay, but look, then what? You
Right. I mean,
know?
I think part of it is, you know, if you're really entrenched in that paradigm, which most people are, because that's what we learn, right? So, like we said, you know, if you want to do more, you know, you've got to build up to do more, and you've got to put more effort in, and you know, um, which is true. It works here for that, you know, to a certain extent, right? But then it's like, you know, if that was 100% true, you know, uh, people wouldn't be looking for other avenues to, you know, progress in life and bring themselves to a new state. They would just work as hard as they could, and wherever that was for them at whatever level, they would just be, you know, that would be it, and you would be done, and you wouldn't be able to progress any further because there's only, you know, not everybody's gonna go to the gym and be like Arnold, you know, it's just not gonna happen, right? So different body forms, different, you know, abilities, all of that, right? So you know, but that's just on the physical level, right? So you may have even the mental attitude to get in there and be in the gym however many hours a day, every day, and all of that. But, you know, there's only so far that will take you, and it will take you far if you're putting yourself to the task. But, you know, there are certain limits there. And so if we look at that, you know, and say, okay, well, you know, do I have to be satisfied with where my life is now and maybe just making small increments up, or you know, maybe even, you know, dives down, um, you know, or can I do something else that will sort of, you know, use other tools that will engage other aspects of me to bring my life to a place that I really like, that all four pillars are going to be, you know, in the balance that I want, right? So my relationships are going to be what they want, what I want them to be. You know, my success is going to be at the level that I want it to be or better. You know, it's like, and my health is going to be where I need it to be or better, and then my spirituality, my connection is tying all of that together, at least from our standpoint, right? It's like that's the element that we're working on, the energetic, the spiritual, that type of thing, and using that to bind all of those things together, and in balancing them, the whole system raises up, right? So that's the idea behind it. And for us, you know, this was, you know, seeing energy is one of those things that we can utilize to, you know, get people in that mode. And so when they realize that they can do that, then they can extrapolate that information and say, okay, if I think about this in context of everything else, you know, can I use, you know, those methods to produce something better in these other areas of my life? And, you know, that's what we're saying. And that's what I've seen most people do. So it's just first we've got to get our foot in the door, right, and get to that ability, and it does a lot of things when that happens, right? It convinces people that there is something there, that there is energy there, even if they intellectually, you know, thought about it, and that was, they could come to some agreement with that. It's not the same as having the experience for yourself and engaging it in that way and really having that experience and knowing from experience that that is true, and that there are things there, and that, you know, oh, with a little more training, I can utilize that for other things and enhance my life. It's beyond just the cool factor. Like, wow, okay, that was awesome. I could see that, and I can turn it on and off. Very important, right?
Comes back to that idea of belief,
right.
which you
So
talk
now
about.
what can I use this for? You know, how can I utilize it to make my life better in these other areas? You know, can I find ways, or can somebody teach me ways to use this so that, you know, it enhances my life beyond the cool factor? Because that only lasts for a little while, and then it's like, you know, okay, now what do I do with this? How do I make it more practical?
Sure.
So
So how do you, can you just take us through the fourfold breathing as
sure.
an exercise and the parameters around that you would, you know, think are really important?
Sure. So, so I'm sitting again in a comfortable position. You know, you can be on the floor on a cushion if you want, or just sitting cross-legged on the floor. You can be in a chair. You know, use the back of the chair if you want, or not. Use it like a bench, so sitting close to the edge if you like that. As long as your back is straight. Again, all the same things happen with, all the parameters are the same as far as meditation or anything else, right? I want to have a very straight back, shoulders are relaxed, but back, so you're opening everything up, and my neck is straight. And again, I always use this visual for myself, and the visual turns into a feeling, right? So it's like I start with a vision of it, and then as I hold that, it sort of, it turns into a sensation. Let's put it that way, a tactile sensation. So I always think of a string attached to the middle of my head, so whatever you feel the middle point is of your head, and that it's being pulled up and taut. So it's like you're like a marionette just hanging on the string, right? So it's like as long as the puppet master is holding you, right? It's like you're able to relax all your limbs and all of your structure, and it's being held in place. And that's always been very good for me. And when I've taught it to other people, it seems to be really, really, exceptionally good for them as well, as to be able to keep the body erect, the spine straight, the neck straight, and and still relax, instead of thinking of it as I've got to keep my muscles tense to keep my back straight and my neck. Oh, I've got to lock everything in, and now I've got to relax. It's like, how do I do that without collapsing or falling backwards or whatever, right? So, but this string idea, it's like just, it's like from a different side, different angle of observation. So it's sort of like that, just planting that idea in your head actually facilitates that staying erect but relaxed, right? And so sometimes too, I also found at another time that some people had a hard time with that sort of idea, or maybe even the visualization of that. I'm not sure. I mean, it doesn't have to be a strong visualization, right? But something that we're all familiar with is a hanger. So it's like your body is, like a suit of clothes, and, you have this hanger, and the hanger's, in your closet hanging up, and it's got this suit, attached to it and just hanging there. And so the body becomes like that. So you feel like there's some support there, and that your body's like a suit of clothes that's just hanging on a hanger that doesn't take any effort on your part to support itself. And so again, it's very straight, and the neck is straight, but that's the idea. And then you're going through the relaxation, right? So just a little bit, like relax the body, find that perfect, comfortable position, right? So it's like rocking a little bit back or forth, nice and slow, trying to find the perfect angle this way. And then, another vector this way, side to side, maybe even a little spiral. It's like you're zeroing in on the perfect sweet spot for being erect and relaxed at the same time. Okay. So, and then from there, I'm following a pattern of, like we'll use 4 because that's the common. And so I'm breathing in for a count of 4. I'm setting up that count and trying to be as equal as possible on each one. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm breathing in, 2, 3, 4, holding my breath at that point, 2, 3, 4, letting it out, 2, 3, 4, and on the bottom holding it, 2, 3, 4. So, and then making that very, very consistent as much as you can. And usually I recommend people just download, because they all have phones, they're downloading an app that
has a metronome.
It has a metronome in it. Yeah, and there's a ton of free apps out there with that. And so you want to get one that is just comfortable for you. Fine. I tend to like things that don't have a real sharp sound. So it's like a click, or like a deeper wooden click or something like that, a little more acoustic, because it seems to put me at ease more than a high ping or something like that. And so, and then you can adjust it really, really easily, right? So you might start with, 1 beat per second, so 60 beats in a minute, right? So it becomes this timing, and you don't have to worry about, then you're counting, but you don't have to worry about keeping the rhythm, right? Keeping the rate of click. It's already there for you. And I find that very, very, it really helps people a lot, because
it's one of those crucial elements, right? Of moving into that play. Again, in the book, I remember we talked about everything becoming, nothing being more important than anything else.
That's
right?
exactly
that place of neutrality.
That place of neutrality with breathing is making it exactly the same on every side. And that's where the metronome comes in really handy, because as I play drums as well, and have for many, many years. And so my rhythm is pretty good, but at the same time, it's like, you can, as you get relaxed and you're more into it, your rhythm can slow down. And then, all of a sudden, what was 1 beat per second is now, 1.5 beats per second. And, it's like it can go off, right? So, as you get used to it, you can turn your metronome down, right? So the next time you do it, maybe it's, you know, half as slow or whatever, so that you're really able to breathe in a lot longer, but then you have to hold it a lot longer, and but you're still doing the same count, right? So it's just the rate will change. So
Fascinating that like manipulating the rhythm of our breathing in this kind of regimented way can actually change our perception that much.
oh yeah, oh yeah, because I mean, think about most people these days, when they're in their normal mode of operation, they're breathing very shallowly. It's like that's sort of a given. It's like one of those things that everybody knows now. It's like when you observe yourself during the day, you know, how often are you actually taking deep breaths, and on a regular basis, and systematically breathing deeply and letting it out, breathing deeply and letting it out. Most people are just breathing very shallowly in here, especially if I'm just doing computer work, sitting at a desk, not really engaging my body fully. It's like most people will end up being in this very shallow range. And so, to be able to really, instigate that nice deep breath, but not straining, right? We don't want to strain. It's just, very easy bringing it up, holding it, very easy letting it go, holding it. It's like this has to be, just so smooth and regular. And that in and of itself will actually start to drop your brainwave down.
Right.
So
It's fascinating. It brings to mind this idea of like hide in plain sight. Because when I think about these techniques and the simplicity of these techniques, it's very much like, how could these simple things produce such a dramatic and beautiful experience that can change my perception of the world, or allow me to access this other dimension of my existence and the world around me. It's like, it's just that just popped into my head, this idea of like hide in plain sight. I don't know why, but it's
right, because I mean, we think about it. It's like, out of all the things that we need to survive, I mean, breathing is right at the top of the list, right? I mean, it's the thing that you can go the least amount of time and still survive, right? So I mean, we can go, a few days without water, depending on the scenario, right? You can go 30 days or more without food, depending on how much reserves you have. But breathing, I mean, it's like, even if, how many of us are in the territory of, who am I thinking of? The magician there, or the stage magician.
David Blaine.
David Blaine, how many of us can hit 17 minutes without breathing, that kind of thing. So, I mean, even at that, you have 17 minutes left.
Yeah.
So that still doesn't sound like too much time, right? So, yeah, breathing is critical for life. And so, adjusting that in many different ways. And, so many traditions have all kinds of breathing exercises. I learned a ton of them, and just little variations change a lot. And so, but it's one of those things that's so tied to life for us that, minor adjustments in that can really make a huge difference in where we want to be.
Right. It's just amazing that respiration can change your brainwave frequencies, and then also your perceptions. It's like, it's I don't know. It's very cool.
Well, it's cool, and I mean, there's lots of scientific literature on that too. So it's not like something that it's just an old tradition, and then we're sort of pulling it out and saying, "Oh, here, do this, and that'll happen." I mean, we can look at all kinds of science. I mean, you can even look at it from the our regular existence side, right? So it's like, you perceive a threat, your breathing gets, more shallow and rapid, right? So you're charging your blood with oxygen to be able to fight or flight, right? Mm-hmm. So, chemicals in your body get, pushed into different modes, and, that's all facilitated by that action. So, and coordinated together, right? So it's a big deal. I mean, but we take it for granted, and that's the hide in plain sight, because we do it all the time. We just don't realize it. It's like, what do people do when something's going on, and then they find out that it's resolved? They have this sigh of relief, right? It's like, okay, everybody's okay. It's like there's that whole, like, getting rid of, any kind of excess, and cortisol levels go down, and adrenaline goes down, and, and then, of course, after the fact, you get the adrenaline shakes. It's the adrenaline trying to get run out of your body because you don't need it anymore, and all of those things. And you know, breathing goes along with all of that stuff. So it's just a matter of you know, in you know, ancient times, they realized that ahead of time without the scientific data to back it up. They just knew from observation and from doing it that, you know, changing your breathing in different ways would have different effects on the person, you know, not just physically, but perceptually as well. So it's like, and so they just started playing with it and coming up with things that were, you know, consistent, you know, consistent application in the vast majority of their population that they were training at the time, if it was monks or whatever. You know, there always will be some little anomaly on the bottom and the top of that, but for the majority of people, you know, these different breathing techniques will have the desired effect, right? So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, sounds good.
Yeah.
For the fourfold breathing, and we'll go on to the next topic.
Right.
For people, unless you have any other thoughts about that. But
no, just, you know, again, try it and see how you feel, and, you know, work up to it, you know. So I would say if you can start even with 3 minutes, that's good, you know. And it's like, or move into 5 minutes, and, you know, if you can do then 5 minutes twice a day, that's a good thing. And so you're progressing. You want to be able to do it, you know. I would say the max on this, just because it won't project you into anything deeper, you know, it does have its limit as well, right? So, but I would say at the most, I mean, people sort of will max out at about, you know, 15 or 20 minutes, you know, of doing that.
Yeah.
Because then there's a you know, it's a diminishing rate of return after that. You can keep pushing it and doing it, and if you're getting some benefit from doing longer, I mean, obviously go ahead. Everybody's a little different, but for most people, that diminishing rate of return will happen around 15 or 20 minutes.
Right. It's so weird, but like in some ways, like when I think about like, oh, I'm gonna like open my third eye and I'm gonna see energy and experience the world in this different way, and that's really like this exciting idea. And when I think about these techniques, especially with this, it's like sounds kind of boring.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is.
I guess that's that thing that came up for me, like that hide in plain sight thing. It's like,
really, it's not some super magical like diagram and
last
and
time
then,
I
like,
read about energy,
you know, and
yeah.
saying some spells, and, you know, all of a sudden, bloop, my third eye's on. You know,
When's
it's
the
like,
part where I take some special herbs and like
right,
cut a
special
hole
herbs.
in my forehead and frickin' jam those things in there, you know, and like stay up all night for 7 days and like,
Right,
you know what I mean? Like,
right.
where's that part? Because
Right.
like, you know, and I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is, I mean, I think it's just it's a complex question, right? It's like part of it is our culture too, that you know, we've sort of been divorced for a long time from you know, that other side, that mystical side, and you know, even to some extent the religious side and, you know, spiritual side, and we've sort of moved into that, you know, where technology has become our God, if you will, or, you know, our savior at this point, and so we've put a lot in that, but that's very, you know, it's hard and, you know, concrete and those types
And
of
fancy.
things. And fancy, right? It's, you know, there's a lot of distraction there for sure. You know, it's getting more complex all the time, right? And so, you know, thinking about things like this that are pretty common. It's just that, oh, I never thought about breathing like that, but it's just breathing. So
It's
how could that
just
facilitate
breathing.
this?
And it's boring breathing because it's not like I'm going, you know, and then I'm building up to something and I'm charging myself up with this energy, and then I'm like fucking blasting my third eye open. It's like, no, I'm just breathing normally and deeply to the rhythm of a 4 count. Like,
right. And I'm not saying that, you know, this breathing, you know, we're not saying that the breathing will, you know, turn your ability to see on. It's a supporting mechanism, right, to help you move into the states that you need to be in order to do this. I mean, everybody can get glimpses. That's no problem. I think everybody out there that I've ever met has had a glimpse of seeing energy. You know, it's like, whether it's just a little, I mean, it's everything from like thinking you just saw something move in the corner of your eye and looking and there's nothing there. Okay, little flashes of light here or there. If you're not having a, retinal detachment or something, it's like, okay, which is completely different. But that's something. Or seeing, in a peak moment, seeing, outline of some color around somebody, or those types of things. Those are flashes. For us, it's, the difference is we want it to be more than that, and we want it to be consistent. That's the real thing that we're going for, right? Is that I want to be able to turn it on and off when I want to use it, turn it off when I don't want to use it, and I want it to be consistent so that I can do it at will. That's it. And so, the breathing, fourfold breath is a way to sort of stabilize yourself so that you can move into those territories. The idea is that, I don't have to, in the end, I don't have to do fourfold breath for 5 to 15 minutes to put myself in a state to be able to see. It's like, can you just hang there for a second? Let me do this breathing technique for a while. It's like for 5 minutes even, you're doing box breathing. And it's like, and the person's going like, okay, already.
I want to know what color my aura is. Come on, man.
That's right. So, it's the ability to move into that state and anchor it in so that you're very comfortable and very used to feeling that state. What does that feel like compared to my normal state of engagement? And once I have that in, then I can just bring that up and, move into that place. And that facilitates the next step of, bringing that ability up and bringing you the quality of your seeing online. That's all. So, yeah, but it's there is a lot of that. I mean, it's definitely something that we've been thinking about and dealing with for a while. Is like a lot of these things. I mean, it sounds so much better when somebody, I mean, not that you'd want to go there until you actually have to do it. It sounds like a great idea, right? Like, I'm just going to go down to the Amazon and I'm going to have some, Bushmen, like cut my third eye open and, shove a sacred stick in there and turn on my third eye, and then heal me instantly and be okay. And it's like, yeah, it sounds great until you get there and you see that this, guy is, whatever. And, it's like, no, I don't think I want to do that anymore. It's not so important anymore.
Well, I think there's also a draw, or I think there's something that's, there's a certain attraction to that kind of catharsis too, because, for a lot of us, it's like for anybody that's been trying to see energy or been interested in it for a long time, but hasn't been able to produce the experience. It's like, there's a certain level of frustration there, right? And maybe a certain level of like frustration in daily life too, especially if you're in that high beta problem solving mode all day long, or you're working hard, or you're trying to get results in these different territories of your life or whatever. And so there's a certain appeal to a cathartic experience where somebody's going to do something crazy to you, and maybe you're going to like, purge your demons and, like whatever. And then this whole other world is going to open up to you. And so these techniques that are, seemingly very mundane, it's like where's the excitement, where's the drama, where's the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and I think you're right. I think it's again sort of indicative in our culture, right? It's like where our society is going at this point, or where it's moved into at this point, and people are starving for some adventure in their life. It's sort of like, get up, don't feel rested, get ready real fast, choke something down, drink some coffee on the way to get my brain moving, get to work, pound it out all day long, good, bad, whatever, and then, drone home, get some food again, maybe do something with your family, maybe not, and maybe watch some TV or something brainless to get you, into the zone for going to sleep. And then you go to sleep at night and you start the whole thing over again. It becomes this very sort of, even though it's fast paced, it's a very narrow range of human experience, let's say. So I think we're really desirous of something more. It's like, how can we, reinstitute, some sort of adventure in our life, where we're engaged, like when we were kids, we didn't know it was coming the next day sometimes, many times we didn't know. My parents weren't real upfront about, like, unless it was something we were planning, they weren't real upfront, like, oh, what are we going to do tomorrow? And it's like, oh, we'll see when we get there. It's like, don't worry about it, And, so we were always sort of in that attitude of like, okay, what's coming next? I mean, for somebody like me who grew up in a very rural place. It was sort of, even when we would, foray into the forest or whatever, it was, we didn't know what was coming next. We were sort of always hyper alert and, engaging the environment in that way and engaging each other and ourselves in that way too. And that sort of just, sort of, uh, extended into my regular environment. I never lost that effect. I always desired that. So, what was next on the agenda for keeping that adventure going every day? I mean, uh, and it's not that I don't have times of lull, right? But it's sort of like I'm regrouping and catching my breath from whatever just happened and waiting for the next thing to happen. How am I going to engage the next thing? There's always that little bit of, uh, like I've got to have all my tools at hand, because it's like, what adventure is coming to me, and am I going to be flexible enough and adaptive enough to overcome whatever journey is coming to me at this point? And that can be from moment to moment or day to day or week to week or year to year, right? So, and I think people really want that. I mean, that's why we go for all of these, adventure tourism and, zip lines through Costa Rica and, whatever, all of these things, and sort of engaging it on those levels, and which is wonderful. It's a great thing. But I think uh, we sort of, when people do that, the majority of people come back with this, after a week of telling all your friends all the things you did and sort of ranting and raving about it, you sort of slide back into that mode, and there's that bit of like reintegration depression, right? So it's like, okay, now I've got, another 20 to 40 weeks before I can do that again. What am I going to do the next time? So you're living your life for these little 5 or 7 day or 10-day breaks of adventure in your life, and then, droning another year until you can get back to that again, or whatever that is. And I think people they're tired of it.
So where's the adventure in fourfold breathing?
I think the adventure in fourfold breathing is, as you're doing it, you're noticing over time, you're noticing that you're able to shift into a different state of perception. And in that, you can find, a lot of different things. I mean, it could be just a very peaceful place, right? Or it could be something where, your thoughts become much more clear. So, you may have different physical sensations in the body, so everything starts to be heightened a little bit. I mean, I think a lot of times fourfold breathing, if people have, if they have had any experience with anything mind altering, from coffee to alcohol to any kind of plant medicine to whatever, one of the things that it does is it changes your perception, right? So people have their, pick your poison, right? It's like whatever is good for them. They like it for its ability to change your perception. And so tune some things down, open other things up, right? So, and it's like it changes the ratios of what's going on for you. So it's like, certain plants will make, hearing music sound better, even songs that you just have memorized, and when you're in that state, it just, something happens, right? It opens up a whole new level of that. Well, that's a different perceptual state. And obviously it's one that we enjoy because human beings have been doing that forever. Right? This is not just something new. I mean, it's only been 100 years or a little bit more where countries have made certain things illegal or not, and like now it's all just coming back with new research and all of this. But for those things, but alcohol has been a drug of choice for a really long time, and obviously it's not just that you like the taste, right? It does something to your perceptual state. It relaxes you, because we know it's a central nervous system suppressant, and sort of takes the edge off, and kind of puts you in a little bit more, hopefully a little more jovial mood. But it can enhance your your everything from enhancing your food, right? Wine at dinner or whatever, and enhancing your conversational mode with people that you like, and there's just all sorts of things that are there. And if it didn't do that, there would be very little of it around. And I mean, and if you don't believe that, I mean, just look up the history on prohibition. People went crazy
Right.
They did all kinds of ridiculous stuff to make alcohol, to get alcohol, to do whatever. It's so ingrained in the human realm that, that perceptual state change is something that I think we're hardwired to go to. And it's not, I'm not saying that it's good for everyone, and I'm not saying that I'm endorsing it or not endorsing it. I'm just saying it is something that I believe that we're literally hardwired to search out these altered states of consciousness, and and everybody's got to find their way to sort of get to that. But fourfold breathing is one that will, I think will enhance that, bring you into, a slightly altered state, sometimes a more profound altered state if you really stick with it, and can really enhance your ability to experience that adventurous part. If something that simple can change your outlook on, even for a few moments in your observation of this world, that, what else can do that, and how much more profound can it be? Can I generate that stuff on my own? Because you're not using anything else other than altering your breathing.
Mm.
So what else is there? It's like, what else can I do, to sort of move that along? So I think that that's valuable.
Right. And having the control to be able to shift into neutral, right? The perception, or a neutral perceptual state.
Right.
Right. To then be able to shift into something deeper or different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So to go from that observational state where I can disengage from certain things that are too much in whatever level, and then sort of acclimate to it, and then as I re-engage that, it's like, oh, I have a different perspective of that now,
right?
And it balances it out. So I'm making better choices. I'm doing, I'm engaging it in a better way and acting on it in a better way too. Whatever the problem is, I'm resolved to take some action on this and do it well, and differently maybe than I've done it in the past, and that way I can move my life forward, achieve my goals.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you.
No problem.